The Whispering Room. Claire Hastings had never been close to her grandmother Edith. They spoke on holidays and exchanged polite letters, but Claire always found her cold and distant, a woman wrapped in lace and silence. So it surprised her to learn she was the sole inheritor of Edith's estate when she passed. The house was a brooding Victorian perched on a hill just outside the sleepy village of Marrowick. Locals called it Wyrmwood House, a name Claire never quite liked the taste of. It loomed above the tree line, its spires like crooked fingers clawing at the sky, and the air around it always seemed just a little too still. But Claire needed a fresh start. Her job in the city was suffocating, her recent breakup still fresh in her bones. Renovating the old house into a rustic bed and breakfast seemed like the perfect escape. The first day she arrived, she was struck by the silence. No birdsong, no wind, just the crunch of gravel under her boots as she approached the heavy front door. Inside, the house was preserved like a mausoleum. Dust lay thick on every surface, and the grandfather clock in the foyer had stopped ticking at exactly 3:17. Each room whispered of another time, floral wallpaper, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, and photographs with eyes that followed. She spent the day walking from room to room, noting what needed repairs. But one door at the far end of the upstairs hallway gave her pause. It was slightly open, just a crack, though she didn't remember touching it. Inside was a small study. Bookshelves lined the walls, a faded rug sat curled in the corner, and an old writing desk stood sentinel under the window. The air felt colder there, stale and heavy. Claire reached to switch on the light. Nothing. She left quickly and didn't return to the room that day. The whispers begin. On her third night in Wyrmwood House, Claire was woken by a soft sound, a whisper. It was faint, almost imagined, like wind brushing over dry leaves. She lay in bed, frozen, listening. Claire, she shot up. Hello. Silence. She got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The house was dark and cold, the moonlight pooling on the floor like spilled milk. At the far end, the door to the study stood ajar once again. She closed it gently, locked it this time, and returned to bed. The whispers came again the next night, more insistent now, and longer. Words she couldn't make out, but layered with urgency. Sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. Claire started having dreams, vivid and strange. A woman pacing in the study. A candle burning low, ink running across pages, a name being whispered over and over, Margaret. Margaret, Margaret. She woke each morning with a headache and a sense of dread. The journal. While cleaning the attic, Claire discovered a wooden box filled with old letters and journals. Most were written in her grandmother Edith's hand, but one worn, leather-bound book stood out. It was signed simply, M.H. Margaret Holloway. The entries were unsettling. October 12, 1949. She watches me now, always. She says it's for my own good, but I know better. She locks the door when I disobey. October 29, 1949. I begged her to let me write. It's all I have left of myself. She only smiles, that awful smile, and says, write something worth remembering. November 3, 1949. There's something in the room. I hear it when the light goes out, whispering to me. Sometimes it uses my name. Claire's hands trembled as she read. You came back. The final straw came a week later. Claire was heading upstairs when she heard the creak of the study door opening on its own. She froze. The hallway was dark, and that familiar cold swept down the corridor. Her breath fogged. A voice spoke, clear and close this time. Claire, don't forget us. She ran. She left the house that night, staying at the village inn. The next morning, she returned with a priest from the next town over. He agreed to bless the house, though he looked uneasy the moment he stepped inside. Something's been trapped here, he said softly. A memory too strong to fade. After the blessing, Claire returned to the study. It looked the same, the desk, the books, the air still and thick. But now, on the dusty windowpane, as if drawn by an unseen finger, were 3 words. You came back. Claire sold the house that spring. Moved to the city. Never spoke of it again. Wyrmwood still stands. New owners tried to renovate it, but none stayed long. They always leave suddenly, sometimes in the dead of night, without ever explaining why. And still, if you walk by the hill on a quiet evening and the wind is just right, some say you can hear a voice from the study, whispering through the trees. Calling a name. The boy who heard her. 3 months had passed since Claire Hastings left Wyrmwood House for good. The Brenners, a family of 4, had moved in with enthusiasm and a dream. John and Eva were newly self-employed, hoping to turn the sprawling Victorian into a countryside retreat. Their son, Jamie, was 7, quiet, curious, and unusually perceptive. His sister, Lily, was just a baby. To the Brenners, the house was charming. Spooky, sure, but solid. It needed work, but it had history. That's what Eva kept saying, even as the upstairs hallway grew colder by the day. Jamie hears her. The first time Jamie heard the whisper, he was climbing the stairs. It was just after sunset, and the shadows in the house had deepened into something thicker. Something that clung. As he reached the landing, he paused. The study door, which his parents always kept closed, was open. Just slightly. A soft voice called from within. "Jamie." He froze. His heart jumped. He turned to look, but there was only darkness behind the door. The drawing. The next morning, Eva found Jamie at the kitchen table, sketching with charcoal on old paper they had found in the attic. He had drawn the study perfectly. Too perfectly. Every book, every desk leg, even the lace curtains on the fogged window. But what chilled her was the woman in the drawing. She stood near the desk, facing the window. A shadow of a figure, mouth open mid-sentence. Her eyes were hollow, and scrawled across the window pane in the sketch were the same words from Claire's nightmare. "You came back." Eva asked where he saw it. Jamie didn't look up. "She showed me. The night it rained." That night, a storm rolled over the countryside. Thunder shook the windows, and rain lashed the walls of Wyrmwood House. John was in the basement when he heard footsteps above. He assumed it was Eva checking on the baby, but when he came back up, she was asleep in the living room, Lily in her arms. Jamie was missing. They found him sitting in the study, alone, barefoot, staring at the window. His lips were moving. When John touched his shoulder, Jamie turned slowly. His voice was distant, not his. "She's not finished writing yet." The silence doesn't last. The Brenners didn't speak much of the night Jamie was found in the study. He didn't get sick. He didn't act frightened. He just withdrew. He spent long hours in his room, drawing. Sketch after sketch of the same woman, always at the desk, always facing the window. Sometimes she turned to look at him. In the drawings, her face was never quite clear. When Eva tried to ask him about her, he simply said, "She's trying to remember." Voices from the paper. One evening, Eva was cleaning Jamie's room when she found one of the sketches humming. Not audibly, but like a pressure in her head, like something murmuring just under the skin of the world. The drawing was different. This time, the woman was writing. Her hand blurred mid-motion, the candle beside her guttering. On the page in front of her, scribbled in jagged charcoal strokes, were the words, "Don't let her finish." Eva backed away, her breath caught in her throat. When she blinked, the words were gone. Downstairs, the clock. That night, John noticed the grandfather clock in the foyer, the one that had never worked, was ticking again. Tick, tick, tick. The hands read 3:17. They hadn't moved, but the ticking wouldn't stop. The locked drawer. Jamie woke screaming 3 nights later. "She's looking for her book," he sobbed. "She can't find it and she's getting angry." John tried to calm him, but Jamie's eyes were locked on the ceiling, wide and glassy. Eva didn't sleep that night. Instead, she returned to the study. She pulled open every drawer in the desk. One was locked. She found the key in a small box in the fireplace grate. Dusty, rusted, but it turned the lock. Inside was a thin, brittle book bound in peeling leather, the final journal of Margaret Holloway. Margaret's last entry. Eva read it by candlelight, her hands shaking. November 10th, 1949. "I remember now. She wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to keep me quiet. Edith said it was for the best, that my writing would dig up things that shouldn't be disturbed. But I remember the voices. I remember the door never opening. I remember screaming into my pillow just to hear my own voice. I remember the cold. If someone finds this, don't let her finish my book. Burn the pages. Bury the desk. If she finishes it, she becomes real again." And upstairs. As Eva finished reading, the room shifted. The air dropped. The candle flickered once, then out. From upstairs, a soft rustling. Jamie's voice, whispering, but not in his own voice. "She's almost done writing." Eva stared down at Margaret Holloway's final journal, the ink so faded it looked like shadows on the page. Her mind raced. Don't let her finish. She becomes real again. It sounded like madness. Or worse, belief. Thunder cracked in the distance. Upstairs, Jamie whispered in his sleep again. Not words, not exactly. More like a memory trying to claw its way through his mouth. Eva rose, and took the journal with her. Jamie's room was cold. The window, which had been locked, was now open just an inch, fog curling in along the sill. Jamie sat up in bed, eyes glassy. He wasn't alone. Eva turned, and there she was. Margaret Holloway. Or, what was left of her. A pale, hollow-eyed silhouette, hovering in the corner of the room, hands ink-stained, mouth slowly moving without sound. Her presence flickered like candlelight, barely held together. Eva's hand tightened around the journal. "Why, my son?" she whispered. The figure turned toward her, and for the first time, her mouth moved with sound. "He listens." At exactly 3:17, the entire house sighed. Floorboards groaned. The clock struck once. Jamie stood, walked past Eva, eyes unfocused, and down the stairs. Into the study. The door shut behind him with a click. The final pages. Eva ran after him, but the door wouldn't budge. Inside, Jamie walked to the desk, placed his hand on the surface, and whispered, "She just needs to finish the last page." Eva screamed, pounded, cried, but something old and unbreakable had taken hold of the house. Margaret's journal grew heavier in her hands, like the ink was soaking fresh into the pages. Inside the study, frost spread across the walls. Papers lifted, danced in the air like birds trapped in a cage. The desk glowed faintly from within, as if lit by the story itself. And Jamie began to write. Margaret's voice. As Jamie's hand moved, the air shimmered. And Margaret spoke, not in fear, not in rage, but softly, with aching memory. "I wanted to tell the truth. But they said it wasn't my place. They locked me in, whispered through the walls. And when I died, they buried me in margins. I've waited so long for someone to finish my words. And now, I remember how it ends." Let her finish. Eva, still outside the door, pressed the journal against the wood. The whispering stopped. The desk inside pulsed once, with light. Then silence. The door creaked open by itself. Jamie stood in the quiet study, his hand still on the desk. Margaret was gone. The frost melted. The room warmed. In Jamie's hand, a page. New, clean, signed, Margaret Holloway. 1 year later, Wyrmwood House was never truly silent, Oldwood never is. But the voices were gone. Eva kept the journal locked away. Jamie rarely talked about that night, but sometimes, when he drew, Eva would see her, Margaret, sitting peacefully at the desk. Finished. Jamie sits in the garden under a grey autumn sky, sketching. The last leaf falls from the oak tree above. He looks at his mother, smiles faintly, and says, "She says thank you."